Good afternoon, everyone. Do you hear me? Good. So today we'll be talking a little bit about artificial intelligence, but actually about something else, not just intelligence as IQ, but about emotional intelligence as EQ, and then how we do that with machines. The field is known under various names, and some of those, except of emotional artificial intelligence, are things like affective computing or human-centric artificial intelligence, because the human is really the center in emotions, right? However, behind all of this is actually the very same thing, and that is automatic analysis of human behavior, and specifically human facial behavior. If you think about human face, it is really fascinating. You use the human face to recognize other members of our species, to recognize your friends, your family, and so on. We also use it to recognize things like age or gender. We judge the beauty based on the face, unfortunately. And we even sometimes judge personality. Don't do that one in any case. More importantly, the human face is really the only observable window to our inner self, to our emotions, our intentions, our attitudes, our moods. You really see almost anything on somebody's face. And hence, it is not surprising that in the past 10 years, the field of automatic facial behavior analysis and automatic emotion analysis from faces has become really popular. We work on this, I work on this with my group for already 20 years. So in the past 20 years, we developed many different algorithms. And I will talk about some of those. We can very accurately track human faces. When we talk about tracking human faces, we also talk about tracking and detection of specific parts like eyebrows and eyes and mouth and how they move, right? We can also recognize specific gestures like smiles or frowns. And we can do some interpretation on a higher level, like the intensity of emotion, like interest, or intensity of liking something. The most recent research that we did is in a similar field, and it's done in Samsung AI Center in Cambridge, and it is actually on recognition and re-identification of people in the scene, people whom you never saw. So we can learn the models of these people very quickly. We just see a person for a couple of frames, and we can learn who this person is, and then re-identify this person multiple times in absolutely no matter how long video, right? So this is very useful for robotics, because if you have a robot that is, for example, a receptionist, you would like to know whether this person already came to you or not. So to actually store a model of this person and know what he or she asks, so you can actually adapt your answers to the fact whether you saw this person or not. However, I mean, we achieved quite a lot, but we cannot track and analyze all possible facial expressions. Some of these are illustrated here. People with, this is pity that one doesn't run, but people with a lot of occlusions, like long beards, sunglasses, caps, and so on, that's difficult. Many people in the scene, and then with a lot of occlusion, that's difficult. Atypical facial expressions like the lady enjoying her sky jump, that's very difficult, right? Nonetheless, we can do quite some useful things with the technology as it is available now. And I cannot talk about all possible applications, and I will not talk really about main commercial applications, because the main commercial application is really what I worked on with a company called Realize. They are working on learning how people react to different advertisements. And, based on their reactions, they would judge whether what is advertised has any chance to be sold or not. And as you can imagine, most of the times people don't react at all. Like 80% of reactions is like no reaction whatsoever. But if you have a reaction and it's a positive one, then it's probably that this advert is very good or that the product is very good. Or if people have really negative reactions. But that's really commercial. So currently I will talk about something else. So I will talk about two cases. And the first one is autism. Autism currently affects really a lot of people. So we have every year 50,000 people in United States. This is only United States. It's not UK. In UK, you have another 15 to 20,000 people diagnosed every year. So that's diagnosis. But when somebody has autism, the whole family is affected because you have to adapt to living with a person with autism. The main issue with autism is that people who suffer from autism miss Gestalt. Gestalt is the ability of the brain to interpret human faces as a whole. Autistic kids miss that, and they see the faces as a set of parts. Eyebrows, eyes, mouth, they all move differently and separately, right? So, if you think that there are 10,000 different facial expressions that the human face can express, 7,000 of which we express on a daily basis, and these kids don't have this gestalt. They actually see 7,000 different facial expressions. We, typically developing people, actually interpret those facial expressions in maybe 15 categories, 20 categories. They see 7,000 different categories, right? So it's very difficult for them. What is the effect of this is that they are completely confused with our faces. So they avert their eye gaze. What's the consequence of that is that they do not see what are the expressions which goes with certain emotions. So they do not learn what is the expression that their parents, friends, teachers express when they're upset, when they're happy, and so on. So they don't know how to express those emotions when they feel them, right? So it's a breakage in communication. Very long time is devoted to the therapies of autistic kids, mostly teaching them exactly this, how to recognize facial expressions and how to express those facial expressions. Because, if you are small one, and also your language is usually not very well developed, and you cannot express yourself in any way except of screaming and making some expressions that nobody understands is super frustrating, right? So the problem with human therapists is really that we as humans, we love emphasis. And when we teach the little ones, when you are happy, you should smile. We actually smile, but then we raise the eyebrows, open the eyes, and do all other stuff, which is not anymore the smile, which is the smile plus opening of the eyes, or eyebrow raise, which is a different expression. Hence, we came to this idea, okay, we have robots. You can program the robots. The robot will show always the same expression. No problem there, right? You program it. And then we introduced the robots in the therapy with autistic kids. And the results were really amazing. The therapy is very simple, actually. You have the therapist will say to the child, okay, show me the expression of happiness. The robot will hear this word, happiness, will smile. The child will repeat this expression, and the robot will recognize whether the expression was the happiness expression, which was supposed to be the happiness expression, or not, right? So you have immediate feedback because the robot will say to you, okay, shall we try again? Or it will say to you, oh, you did so well. Well done, right? You can extend this therapy much further. You can then show the icons of expression so that they actually have this translation in the mind of what they see as the icon to the expression that they should express. And you can even, extend it further to this epistemic logic, which is, when you ask the child how you would react, how Tim will react if Tim's train was broken, right? For us, this is very simple. For them, this is super difficult, right? Because the center of the world is themselves. So they would always say, I feel happy if they feel happy. Tim feels happy because they feel happy, right? And they would not understand that actually Tim would feel differently. So that's the really most difficult case. In any case, what is really great about this is that autistic children love robots. They love everything what is mechanic. So that's why they are completely entranced with trains, and everything what is mechanic has parts and moves around, right? So robots are really cool for that. And we not only succeeded in teaching these basic expressions to the kids in a better way, but we actually observed very interesting other effects. So this small boy that you see here, the guy who is behind him is his daily therapist. And he is his daily therapist for already 1 year. And he told us after this session that he has never seen the boy in the past year being so attentive. Many autistic kids suffer from ADHD, ADHD, sorry for the pronunciation, which is, they cannot focus actually on things. They're super active. They lack the focus to do the things, and hence to learn the things. So this is like one of the effects. The other effect was observed in our Serbian study, where we had this little one is actually a nonverbal child. When you have a nonverbal autistic child, this doesn't mean that the child cannot speak. It means that the child chooses not to speak. So he went home, and that evening after the session said to his mother, and tomorrow in school there will be a robot. And for us, this was like absolutely wonderful, because you have this awakening. So not only that you can really contribute to learning of the children, but you can actually move them out of this world in which they live. So that was really great. And we continue this study. So another case about which I want to talk is depression. Depression affects currently a very large portion of the population, Western population. So we are currently observing in the young adolescents 160% increase in depression. This is horrible. So we are talking about maybe 17% of young adolescents, mostly ladies, are affected by depression. Very similar statistics are for the elderly people. In UK, the percentages are 22% of people above 60 years old are affected by depression. The problem with depression really is that the signals of depression are very subtle. You have to know the person in order to detect those signals. And in especially elderly cases, people are underdiagnosed. We have actually 1 in 10 people suffering being diagnosed in a timely fashion. And that is a great pity, because depression can be helped very well, right? Which, in difference, for example, to other problems with aging, such as dementia, right? So we had just a brief study with this population that was done with Channel 4, in collaboration with Channel 4. They had this very interesting idea of bringing elderly people together with children and seeing whether their feelings will be better after 6 weeks spent with children. So we did a very brief recordings of people before they were having these 6 weeks with children, and after they were having this 6 weeks with children. And Channel 4 wanted to give us a test, so they said, we will not give you the whether people suffer from something or not, please tell us, based on your analysis. And we did extremely well. We actually recognized 92% of cases of depression. So how we did that is based on analyzing the videos of people. So we actually ask people to watch certain movies, and these are the reactions. So based on this, people usually, when I ask them what the lady was watching, would tell me that she was watching something really horrible, some kind of horror movie, but actually she was watching funny movies. But because of the negative bias, which is very typical for depression, she actually has this very strong disgust reaction. So even though you would expect a person to smile and laugh because you showed something which is funny, that was not the case. It was actually exactly the opposite. And this is caused by this negative bias, which is very typical for depression. So we are currently working on a grant and raising the funds to build actually the application, a mobile app, which would be able to detect these early signals of depression. And then if these signals are accumulated, because this is very typical also for depression, it fluctuates with the time and with your biorhythm. So it is important to actually have consistent flags over a longer period of time before you say to the person you actually have maybe some, you know, maybe you want to see a doctor. But as with any technology, you have good uses and you have bad uses. So this technology can be misused. And I will just talk about a few of those, actually one of those. Facebook filed a patent in December 2017, in which the patent is for a camera that will be placed in the shopping malls. The camera will recognize you based on your Facebook profiles and based on the images that all of us so gladly put on the Facebook walls. We also tag everybody. And then based on the fact that what we like and what we dislike, which is also available to Facebook, and then based on what you search in the shop and how much you show the liking stop on certain departments and so on, the price given to you will be customized. So although this might be just a few pennies or a few, you know, pounds, it's not okay. But the worst part of this is that medical equipment and medicines are not excluded from this patent. So this is, I think this is not okay. I mean, please, it's not that I blame Facebook. They're not the only ones doing this or doing similar things. It's not about that. It is just one example, right? And I think actually what is really important is that we all collectively understand that the data, our data, is our data, and that we should protect this data, right? We as individuals. And in order to do so, we need to invest as a community to technologies that can help us with that. And there are a number of technologies that can help. One is edge computing. That actually means that all the processing will happen on your router. Everything what is behind your router in your home will be protected. Internet doesn't have the access to that. And you can still have all your personal information within all your devices behind the router, right? And another one is embedded AI. So all the processing will be happening on your phone, for example. So your private data remains private, remains on your phone. That concludes my talk. Thank you very much for your attention.
We now have an amazing panel discussing some of those themes, and I'd like you to all welcome them up.
All right. Do you know where you're supposed to be sitting? No. Okay.
Will you sit on this side?
No, no one's on us.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
It seems to...
Maja, do you want to swap? No. Okay. We're good.
Okay, should be fine.
Well, thank you very much for coming. I think that might be you. Yeah, it is you. Have we got another microphone for this man, please? Can you all hear us, by the way? Can you hear us at the back? Okay. I will have to throw him out in a moment, I think. Thank you. So we've got a very... Oh, for God's sake. It's only when I speak, it's vibrating against us. If you could just sit out right over there by the door, it would be really useful. So we've got a really... Oh, for God's sake. We can't deal with this. Technical people, you're going to have to do something about this very quickly. And I don't think he should be penalised by being set. Why could you not wear a microphone like everybody else? Yeah, well, it's not helping. So we have a really fascinating panel here. I've had lunch with them and quite a range of opinions and different expertise. It's going to be quite hard to get it all together. So what I'm going to give Maja a little... That was excellent, by the way, Maja. Thank you very much. I'm going to give you another round of applause. Very good start. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask some of them, because one of them might be removed in a minute. I'm going to ask each of them, will you stop that? Can you not do something about this? Okay, maybe you could switch it off and switch it on when it comes to him speaking. That would be a good way of doing it. Have you got a switch on it? Figured that part out. Okay, good.
Okay.
So we're back on course. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give Maja a little bit of a break for a few moments and ask each of these three to tell you just a little bit about themselves, and then I'm going to probe them on their work a bit, and then we'll bring Maja back in. And my job here is to ask them some very awkward questions. This is the ethics stage, and so I won't ask you anything about ethics just to be awkward. No, I have a lot of, just to say this at the beginning, I have a lot of concerns about ethics now. I started working on what I thought I was working on the ethics of technology back in 2006. And in those days, there were probably less than I could count my fingers of us working in this field. But now it's become a commercialized field to the point where the word is becoming meaningless. A lot of people working in the field now talk about ethics washing, and I don't call myself a robot ethicist or AI ethicist anymore because it's becoming meaningless. I just thought I'd point that out since we're on the ethics stage. Now, should we start with you, Munter? This is Munter. Just maybe you should switch the rest of us off for a moment. Just tell us a little bit about yourself. What are you doing?
Yeah, thanks. Turn it on. There we go. Thanks, Noel.
With the motion.
Naturally. So my name is Minter Dial. I'm 54. I've spent the majority of my career working in business. I'm the humanities guys, the most humanities guys on this panel because I haven't really any expertise in AI per se. I'm a storyteller, and I try to bring humanity into the discussion in business, and I do that through writing books, telling stories, and doing films. And my last book, quick plug, is called Artificial Empathy, trying to bring empathy into business and in all the work we're doing with AI.
Sure. So my name is Lucia Komljen. I'm the Director of Insight and Strategy in Telefonica's Global Research Department, with a remit to bring an understanding of what humans expect from technology into the very, very early stages of the innovation process. So far before people are users or part of an addressable market, really trying to understand in a really pure way, actually, what do they expect from emerging technologies? What are their hopes and fears around them? What needs and desires might they have in relation to them? And then to marry that with business insight, tech insight, market insight in order to develop innovation strategy.
Hi, I'm Ross Harper. I have a PhD in computational neuroscience, and I'm the CEO of Limbic. And we're trying to use emotion recognition AI in applications for mental health. So, I mean, as Maja said, absolutely mammoth problem worldwide, cost the global economy $1 trillion annually, and 1 in 4 people will experience a mental health issue this year. So we would like to bring quantifiable metrics to an area of medicine which traditionally relies on qualitative information. Specifically, we're looking at heartbeat time series and physiological signals, which is a slight difference to the types of computer vision you saw in Maja's talk.
Okay, good. Now, can I ask each of you then, I think you've talked about your work a bit. Can I start with you again, Minter, and ask you, how do you think something that you do could be misused?
Let's say, since I turned it on, it's for me. My focus is on empathy in business. And on the one hand, I fundamentally believe that empathy is needed in society and in business for good performance. So it can be used for great ends, at least in terms of getting business performance to improve. However, empathy can also be used to manipulate. And you don't need a machine for the manipulation to happen. I could try to be empathic with you and try to manipulate you as an individual. So I do want to look at the empathy and the human-to-human aspect, and then think about why we want to convey or encode empathy into a machine. Why do we want to delegate empathy to a machine? Maybe we should look in the mirror and review how we should be doing it. So the idea is to put a spotlight on the benefit of empathy, why we should be doing it, and also understand maybe we should be focusing more ourselves on how we can be more empathic in society and business before we even start encoding it in AI. Because I think there is a real risk, A, of manipulation, and 2, of using the machine to do the empathy when we should be doing it ourselves.
So just why are you working in this then? What would be your business goals in this? That was how it could be misused. What's the positive?
What's the positive? Well, the positive is, in a business sense, empathy for me is the most untapped lever of productivity in business. And it's amazing. People talk about it, but they don't do it. We may intellectually understand it, but it needs to be practiced in the day-to-day. And what I'm trying to do is give an encouragement for people to be more empathic. And I must say, I don't want to be a sort of ayatollah of empathy. I want to be someone who's encouraging more empathy. You don't have to be empathic all the time in a perfect way. And if you do that, I'm sure that you will have higher engagement of the employees, therefore hopefully less burnout, more impassioned people who are willing to stay. And then on top of that, you're going to get into the shoes of customers to give them better designed products, better designed websites, and much better customer service.
So in relation to misuse,
yes.
I guess not listening to what I bring to the table, which is essentially the human voices and what people expect and need. We had a very clear directive from a big global study that we did on this subject that any uses of this technology in the sort of emotion economy space, so anything to do with advertising or even e-commerce, was vehemently rejected across the board, across various different demographics. Instead, actually, the predominant applications, to answer your second question, that people valued this technology for, that they were even quite excited about using this technology for, was in the space of emotional well-being. So anything that spans, recognition and in situ mood shifts all the way through to the transformation of your emotional health was valued.
Why would that? What would the problem be there with that? Would there be a problem with that?
I guess the problem would be around making sure that the problem would relate to data, right? The misuse of the data that is required for any product or service that is meant to bring on a sense of emotional well-being, for that not to be used solely for that purpose, and instead to be either sold off to third parties or to be used in the emotion economy space. Yeah.
And same question to you.
Can you remind us of the question, please?
Oh, you might hear me now. It's going to be much more roaring. Excuse me. You have to pay attention more because I can't remember what my question was.
Maybe these two people can help us out.
I think I asked what would be the good use of this technology, do you think?
So good use
You're tracking empathy. You're tracking,
Right.
emotion.
Right.
What would be a good use for that, do you think?
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, obviously, by virtue of the fact that this is my primary activity as a researcher and the director of a company, I think that there is tremendous application for automatic prediction of human emotion in mental health. For the reasons I've already outlined. There's also, just to sort of branch out of my area of expertise, so as not to go on too long about that stuff, entertainment, video games, and being able to make interfaces truly naturalistic and make the interaction between human and computer genuinely naturalistic in the same way that it might be between human and human. I think there's tremendous, exciting applications that can come from this, but obviously, as Maja's already identified, and I think everybody here agrees, tremendous potential for misuse.
What do you think what would your idea of the worst misuse be?
The worst.
Well, just give us some misuse. That you
Okay,
think.
so some misuses are obviously adjusting prices in a dynamic way according to insight into different people. There's also this idea behind emotion recognition. Emotion recognition is very in the same vein as predicting intent and behavior. And when you predict intent and act upon it, you remove the possibility for someone to do something different. And so the mind goes to areas of Minority Report, pre-crime type stuff, where you start judging people based on actions that you believe they were about to take. And I think it can get into a very hairy territory.
Do you worry that what you're doing could result in that?
So specifically, what Limbic is trying to do is we're focusing on the applications in mental health, and it's very specialized in that area that I don't see much scope for misuse in that way. What I would say, and I'm very aware of, is the notion that health insurers could pick up this data. We don't intend for that to happen, but if this technology does get into their hands, then health insurance premiums could be adjusted according to somebody's perceived mental health, which feels unethical to us.
Yes, that is a real worry. And you're all aware that once technology is in the wild, you don't have any control of where it's going once you start this. Well, Maja, I might as well ask you something as well. What would it mean for you? I'm asking you a much harder question. You gave such a good presentation. What would it mean for you to say that a machine was empathetic? Is that meaningless to you? Because it might not be meaningless to several members of this audience.
So I think it is very important. So it's very important to understand AI should never be general. What I mean is you have to know what is the use that you aim at. This is so important. We are consistently generalizing AI. So all of these meetings are always about AI in general, ethics in general, everything is in general. I think it's very important to have this purposeful design. So empathy in robots or in machines can be exceptionally important for the care of people who are gravely ill, of people who are completely alone. This is very important because they would feel better. And if the idea of well-being, because most of people, when you ask them what is well-being, it's about happiness. So if that increases the happiness, that's good. But as I say, given that we are consistently generalizing things, we are also then rejecting some good things. And also, we can, I mean, it's always with two problems, you know, and you also open too many misuses that we cannot even think of.
Yes, there is a I think what you're hinting at there is the trade-off that you often get in human rights, where you can trade off some of your privacy for some of your well-being or some of your dignity for your well-being. But the reason why people get into the generalization, as I say, is once the technology's out there in the wild, you might have created something that's being used by the police or security services for something completely different.
No,
but that
I
wasn't
disagree. There is one thing which is important, and that is how you can ensure that the data stays by you. So I said one of the things which is technological. There is another one which is the tagging of the data by our biometrics. This is not done so far. But if you do that, nobody can misuse it. Because if you didn't specifically allow it, you can sue these people, or company, or government. But there is a kind of disruption that needs to come in order to allow this, because what I'm currently suggesting means also much less income to many companies and much less power to many governments. But on the other side, this is very important for us as individuals.
I really think that's brilliant. Yes. I don't know if we're going to be able to manage that, but that would be the ideal.
Yeah.
But without that, that's the problem. What happens to the technology? And if we get that, then of course everything's solved. Now, the question I actually asked you, which is not the one you answered, since we're being detailed. No, it's a slightly crazy question to me, but I'm just asking you again. Would it be possible for a machine to be empathetic? And I want to ask all of you that.
So empathy is defined...
Not to analyze or classify it, but for the machine to exhibit empathy.
So the point is exactly that. What does empathy mean? What does emotion mean? This is a physiological transformation within our bodies. Machines do not have physiological structure, so they will never be able to be empathetic in the same human way, unless we have cyborgs, which I don't know how they're built, but in principle, no. So I think, however, you can give appearance of empathy, right? And this appearance of empathy can still help people. And this is very important. So you can emulate and simulate the empathy. And this is when we are talking about empathetic machines. But it is not a true empathy. And as long as this machine is clearly a machine and not a humanoid robot, there is no mistake that this is not real. So this is very important as well. So these are some of the questions that ethics committees and bodies should actually impose.
What about you? What's your view on that? Sorry, I'm pushing you outside your normal thinking.
No, absolutely not. Well, empathy... We can define empathy as being able to act upon recognizing the emotions of those around us and decision-making with emotion from others as an input, in which case I totally think it's possible and would be a desired property of our artificial agents. I was interested, Maja, by what you said about... it sounded like what you were saying is that we don't want emotions to be something that machines feel, and that's the component of empathy. I'm not sure if I quite understood that. You mentioned the physiological...
Machines cannot feel.
Right.
This is the whole problem.
Right.
Because the feeling as such is something which is visceral.
Yeah. So, I mean...
Before we get into an argument, let's just hear what the others say. But this is good because I wanted some controversy.
Sure. So I'll build on one of the things that you said, actually, about the shape and form, something that I suppose exhibits its own version of empathy, should assume. So one of the things that we did with our study was we got all our participants to design services using this technology that they would like to see in their lives. Not to lift and shift, like this isn't co-creation, but just to use their ideas as artifacts for us to understand what they need and desire from this technology. And the shapes and forms of these services were really fascinating. We got back things like, I want it to look like a Labrador, or I want it to look like a cartoonish blob with big eyes, or I want it to be a shape, again, in the kind of cartoony space that I can then manipulate to the likeness that kind of works for me. So coming at it, I guess, from the other side, it is also, we know, based on our work, that it's rejected to come in the shape and form of something that might try and at least resemble us in any shape or form.
I was trying to get the idea of the machine itself being empathetic. Or can it be?
Well, if, I guess, in the shapes and forms that we were informed by our participants representing humanity, in terms of whether it should, I guess I err on the side of, does it have to? Is it really needed? And if we were to pursue it, how would you go about ensuring, it doesn't, I guess it doesn't suffer if it was, embodied in any shape or form? What would you need to build into it for it to be an ethical pursuit, if at all? But I don't
You're
see it
slightly
possible.
evading the question, but let's leave it with you. I'm going
So-
to ask the audience as well after this.
Brilliant. Well, let me put in a couple of things. First of all, empathy. You talk about full empathy, and I try to swear away from 100% empathy or full empathy, because the idea of full empathy, we as humans don't know how to do that, and I think it's not possible. So what can empathy be in a machine? And there are two components to empathy. One is a feeling empathy called affective empathy, where if you're crying, Maya, I cry. And for sure, no machine is going to cry, unless it's, fictional. You might think I'm crying because you're crying, but it's just not real feelings. However, there's a second element of empathy, and that's cognitive empathy. And that's where I'm going to study and understand you. I don't need to exhibit to you anything. I just merely understand what you are feeling. So that's why I need your limbic technology. That's why I need your visual recognition before I start putting into the machine the ability to understand from a cognitive standpoint what you're feeling. Afterwards, you don't need to exhibit empathy for empathy to exist. So a machine could potentially be programmed to understand, let's say, cognitively or rationally, some of the things that are going on in your context, in your culture, in your language. And I think that the machine will be able to do that. The one thing I would like to add, I think that while we might be talking about empathy in the machine, we need ethics before we start thinking about the empathy in the machine. And in order to have a machine that is empathetic and ethically consistent, we need to bring empathy as human beings into the ballpark to begin with.
Okay, let me just ask the audience here. How many people here think that machines can not feel empathy? Might not be able to, but at the moment, machines, okay? Hands again. Okay, how many people think that machines can feel empathy? Okay, we've got about 2, 3. Okay, 3, 4. I think that was you twice. How many? Well, no, you're not. I'm not taking points from the audience yet, so please sit down. I'll let the panel make the points. I'm sorry, I'm a hard ass. Sometimes. Now, how many people think that in the future machines are likely to feel empathy? And I'll give you any time in the future. Okay, a few more. So the audience generally, as a whole, doesn't really think that. Okay, so now. Next thing was, I suppose, to ask you is, let's see. Oh, yes. Let's talk a minute about privacy. Do you think that, I mean, you're talking about probing people's emotions either with some sort of heart device or some sort of facial recognition, etc. Do you think that this could be considered, I'll start with you this time. Do you think this could be considered to be the last step in the invasion of our privacy without consent to examine what someone's emotions are? With
the last step?
Say in a shopping mall or something.
I don't think it's necessarily the last step.
Well, forget about the last step.
Yeah.
Do you think it's a step too far?
No, I think we can use emotion recognition, whether it's body or visual, for great effect. I mean, it's amazing what they're doing to discover autism. And so in a contained environment for a proper and well-intentioned purpose, it can be amazing. So like everything, it's the humans that are controlling it, putting the intention into it, that it's going to make it good or bad.
I guess building on what Minter said in terms of possibility, I think this, again, the strong consensus, as again representing the voice of people, is the importance of applying it to where people want it to be applied, but also ensuring that this doesn't happen on an invisible level in the retail space, for example, without having an understanding of what is happening and the intents and purposes of what is being gathered. The invisibility of it is highly rejected, and that is, moving forward, something that ideally we should manage, that we should solve. If we were to, as you say, in the wild, you can't really control it if it ended up being used in that space.
You're talking about transparency, and it's consensual as well.
Yeah, exactly.
What about you then? What do you think?
Emotion recognition and privacy. I think that the same rules apply as do most other areas, I mean, data privacy is almost a separate thing from just emotion recognition, okay? Yes, the data's sensitive, and so the data owner, the end user, is deciding to transact that data, presumably to receive some functionality from a service. If that functionality is that they're going to get taken advantage of by some advertiser, then it's not a sensible transaction, and regulation should be in place to stop that from being abused. Yeah. But otherwise, if they would like to transact this data so that they can receive some benefit for their mental health, for example, then to me it just seems to be a decision of logic.
No, I think that the health setting is quite different, because I go to my doctor and tell them all sorts of things, as long as there's control of the data. But I was thinking of outside that, say, in the wild, like in a shopping mall, a robot serving you in the shop and looking at your pupillary response, all sorts of things, and using that to commercial advantage. Do you think that would be an invasion of privacy or something else?
So absolutely, that might be an invasion of privacy, but then I think the sorts of things that Maja talks about with this edge computing advances can stop this data from moving centrally to some single entity.
I'm going to ask you as well, Maja, but I'm asking you this to take it from the present scenario rather than one where we've constructed that we really are stopping data going out there. We're in agreement about that, but at the moment that doesn't happen. So what do you think about this in terms of privacy?
At the moment, many things do not happen. I mean, look at the people here. Many are with the phones. These phones are switched on all the time. They know where we are, what we are, with whom we are, whether we eat, whether we sit here, whether we are running, whether we are jumping, whether we are happy. So in principle, I think this is happening. It is just that people don't think about it. So, and this is just one step beyond that. So I really think transparency is super important, because in principle, everybody already lost the privacy. So it is just to be very transparent about it and what it is used for. And I think this is what we are missing.
Can I also add on this topic, there is an issue of compliance when it comes to the data. So CCTV is in operation all over the Western world. I mean, China have hundreds of millions of CCTV cameras, and speech can be recorded from microphones. These two types of input signal are more readily available and can be taken without compliance from the end user in a way that is not as common with physiological data, where you need usually to have some sensor strapped onto the individual which the individual knows about. Now, there has been some advance with computer vision technology which can extract heartbeat from facial flushes using computer vision, but that aside, and putting that as an anomaly, generally physiological data requires some level of cooperation from the subject. So that has a structural impact on what data can be used.
So let me just, because we're coming to an end now, I think we've got 5 more minutes, is that right? I don't know where my timer is. There was supposed to be somebody waving 5 minutes, but they haven't. Oh, you. How long have we got? 5 minutes. Could I ask you, I might take one point from the audience, but before that, is there anything any of you want to make that hasn't been made?
Well, I think we're at the early days, and in terms of really what we can do with detecting emotions and using it in entertainment as a great playground, if I may use the expression, for learning about it. And empathy is even further away in terms of right now understanding emotions is where we're at, where certain types of emotions, and even culturally there are different ways we express emotion. And so there's a lot of exciting things to happen. I think we shouldn't judge it just yet, but the intention we bring to it is what's going to make it useful or not.
Yep. I'd quite like to quickly a point that we haven't really got into, which surprises me a little bit, is around the semantics of the issue. So emotions, we all know we've got them, but it's actually really hard to define these things. Psychologists have tried very, very hard. And so when we start talking about empathy, it's another level of abstraction on top of this already nebulous idea of emotions. So when we think about, do we want our machines to have emotions or empathy, I think we first need to lock down exactly what the hell we're talking about. And I would subscribe to the idea that in some strange philosophical sense, and it's contrarian, that I think machines could actually generate emotions themselves, but not in the traditional sense and in this sort of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, depressed robot type sense.
I don't think that was a very good sales pitch for you, by the way,
Yeah.
but nonetheless. So I would like to ask, there was a gentleman over here who was desperate to make a point. Would you like to do that now, or have you gone?
No, I'm still here.
Okay.
But I'll make it anyway now. I've got the
Okay.
chance.
You look pretty desperate to me, but that's just my
Thanks very
emotion
much.
recognition.
The only point I was going to make was the difference between actual empathy and actual feelings, as hard to define as they are, and just the ability to give the apparent, the ability of a robot or an AI, be it Alexa or whatever else, to give an apparent empathy, empathic response. You know, when I shout at Alexa because she's not understood me, it's not unreasonable, in time for Alexa to recognise that and apologise. You know what I mean?
Thank you very much for that. Is there anybody else got a point or a question? Anybody?
Regarding this, what you just said, it's
2
really
minutes.
interesting because emotional speech, when people are shouting or are upset and so on or sad, in fact, the recognition rate of speech falls for approximately 40%. So it's not that strange that Alexa doesn't recognizes what you said. And even when you are upset, you then even start more shouting, so there's no way it will recognize actually what you said. So it's really interesting, in fact, and that's very strange that it's not done, that there is no corpus on emotional speech. And it's like, I mean, there are, but very small. And it's really important to invest in that because is exactly when you are emotional, that's when you need the speech recognized. Because when you are upset, like you are lost somewhere, or you want help from your Google Maps, and then you start in this nervous way, I want there, please help me, and there's no way that the speech recognition will then be recognized. So that's another area where we should invest.
One more question to get in here, please, very quickly.
Sorry, one question.
We've run out of time now.
Once most humans think that a computer or something has empathy, does it really matter if it really does or doesn't? If we all agree that we think it does.
Yes, I think it personally, I don't think it does matter because it's what you get out of the signals and the things that are happening. Back in the 1960s, they created ELIZA, and they thought it was just a joke. It was a way to show how bad machines are. But actually, people started asking it questions and spent hours listening to it. I was listening to this morning about this experience. And people wanted to ask questions, and ELIZA repeated, so what you're saying is it a good thing or a bad thing if the machine... So I'm reformulating what you said. And you start nodding, and you start speaking back to me, and I just reformulate what you just said. Yes, exactly. And I add on. So I'm actually demonstrating empathy through listening, positive listening, and reflecting. And you can spend hours with me, and you will feel better for it afterwards. And besides which, today we suffer from a deficit of empathy in society. It's on its way down, and anything that we can do to render us more empathic is a good thing. So that's my answer. And I'll see you at 4 o'clock for my book signing.
Okay, well, we're just wrapping up now, and I have to say that I'm very pleased with myself here because I actually have very strong opinions on these matters, and I've managed to keep my mouth shut about them, though they might have leaked out a little bit. But I think it was a fascinating panel, excellent, all of you, and I'd like to give them a very warm set of applause.